Welcome to the Difficult Dementia Behavior Part 2 workshop. This is the second video in the workshop, and whether you are a family caregiver for a person living with dementia, or you are helping a family caregiver, you are in the right place. This is the place to get the support and tools you need to prevent and then common dementia behaviors so that you can have a calmer and less stressful experience. And so that you can lovingly respond and reconnect your family member who's living with dementia. I'm Rita Jablonski for some of the people joining the group that I've met yet. I'm a practitioner, researcher, and expert in non-drug ways to prevent and manage many dementia behaviors. I'm working with people living with dementia for the past 40 years, and I've been helping caregivers specifically for the last decade. And in this workshop, I'll be teaching you how to lovingly respond and reconnect to a family member with dementia. And you're going to hear me say that a lot: respond and reconnect. And I say that a lot because I hear they'll tell me, I feel, some people say, I don't feel close to my family member anymore. I feel like I'm with a different person. And it does feel like that. So hopefully these sort of ways to reconnect so that both of you have a better quality of life. Okay. Thank you for all the cool comments and feedback from the last video. The response has been incredible, and I really appreciate people tuning in. Now, if you missed the first video that I did yesterday, you should go and check it out because I covered 3 specific ways to get off the hamster wheel, that endless cycle of arguments and protests that happen when you engage sometimes using certain ways with your family member who lives with dementia. I showed you how to do that on this one video. And it's cool that I got it into one video where some of these techniques took me almost like decades of trial and error to figure out. And I want to save you trial and error. So if you haven't seen that video yet, I have it posted on my YouTube channel. I also have it posted on my Facebook page. What I did is I have a page, Dementia Bitch. It says videos at the top, and the newest one always goes at the top. So yesterday's video was there, and this video, once I'm done editing it, will get up there probably early tomorrow morning. It takes a little while for the editing software to behave itself. If you are listening to the recording, you want to watch yesterday's video first before you watch the one. Okay. Now, yesterday, recap, I talked about how brain changes cause a lot of the behaviors. I used the example of the shrinking box, the damaged highways, and the caregiver vibes, and how we can prevent arguments, protests, and care refusals with our approach. And it does take practice. And also, it helps that you tweak it for your specific family member. I also talked about communicating in short, sweet, and concrete ways, especially when people move into the modern severe stages. And here's something that's really important because sometimes caregivers, they feel like a failure because they're still experiencing behaviors. We can never completely end dementia-related behaviors because they are a way of communication. And I stress that a lot, even in my grants and in other things that I do when I work with nursing homes. You don't ever stop it because then you stop communication. But you get better at figuring out why the behaviors are happening, what needs are not being met, and then meeting those needs. And the purpose is transforming our relationships with our loved ones. That's what we want. So now in this video, I want to take you deeper into preventing and handling common dementia behaviors. And I'm going to show you at least 2 specific strategies that are really helpful in the specific stage. And by knowing which strategy will work best for where your person is on the dementia journey, you will better able current and future behaviors. And bottom line, become a confident and competent caregiver. So there is a reason you are watching this video. It's because you're caring for a family member living with dementia, and you want to know how to lovingly respond to these behaviors and reconnect with your loved one. And there's never been a better time to learn how to respond and reconnect so that you can avoid a lot of the care refusals, the arguments, and some of the yuckier aspects of the disease. So in this video, like I said, I'm going to show you two approaches to get cooperation depending on the stage where your loved one is. And don't worry, I even simplify the stages. I know the Alzheimer's associations and support groups talk about the 7 stages, and that can seem overwhelming. And here's something that those of you who've heard me speak before will have heard me say. Those of you who are new, I'll say it, but those 7 stages came from research studies because as researchers, we love to put everybody and everything in neat little boxes to perform statistical analyses. And the more stages you have, the better you get. You can show change or you can show some type of success with your intervention. If you only have 3 options or 3 outcomes, 3 stages, 3 categories, statistically, it doesn't work as well. And I am super simplifying the math, but when you have more stages, you can argue that your intervention may be slow to progression from stage 2 to 4 versus if you only have 1 to 3. So if you have 7, you can show movement and or lack of movement better than if you have 3. So the 7 stages I don't find particularly helpful because even as a researcher, when I was trying to put people in one of those 7 stages, the instruments I used had criteria for each stage, and I'd have the person doing some activities that would put them in stage, say, 3, but they also had some problems that were listed in stage 6. So we split the difference and said like 4. And as a researcher, if I was having trouble doing it from a clinical perspective, it's hard as well. But so let's get started with the stages and jump into the content. The mild, early in the journey, some people will say, my loved one has early dementia. I tend to avoid that because there is something called early onset. And I have people get early onset and early confused. But a lot of clinicians will use the term early. I put early in the journey. But in the beginning, you do have episodes of forgetfulness that at first respond to reminders. John, I told you this. Oh, yeah, that's right. Maybe they're just saying that to appease us. But those episodic events then turn into confusion. And some people will say, I don't feel like I'm remembering. There might be awareness of the problem. You will notice familiar objects being misplaced and the use of what's called circumspect speech. So instead of me saying, I have a glass of water, I may say, the thing you put water in and you drink from. And I am so sensitized to that that when I find myself doing it for a word I don't use very often, I'll laugh to myself and say, uh-oh, I wonder if I'm having memory issues. We all do that. Also, in the mild stage, in the beginning stages, you may notice that your loved one is having more difficulty remembering new material, such as names of new acquaintances, or if they're reading a book that's they've never read before, they may have trouble absorbing what they're reading and the plot. I had someone who showed up in my office, and the main reason this person wanted to be seen was the Game of Thrones was a big hit. This is when it was. I think you can stream it on HBO or something, or maybe Netflix. But at the time, it was we were waiting for like the next season, and it was really gaining a lot of traction. I think we were waiting for like the last season, and this person came in because he was having trouble following the plot. And I'm thinking, I don't think that's dementia. I think that's the Game of Thrones. It's pretty convoluted, and his name open regular designers, and that's this individual was sensitive to follow the plot. That's what into the clip. Now, in some of the behaviors that tend to start in the mind of the early dementia journey is something called Ignoria. Person with dementia is unaware of their problems that they've got. They are not in denial. Denial is different. People who use denial know they should some level they're choosing to push it away. And the individual they've got, they they're completely unaware that they have asked the same question 10 times in the past. And then if you get impatient, which is normal, and you say, but you just asked me that, then they react with anger or hurt because they don't remember asking that question. So one of the approaches is to respond to each question as if it's for the first time. And caregivers nobody does this perfect, because I remember being told to respond to each question as if it was the first time when I was a nursing assistant. And I remember, like, my first month on the job, I had this woman who used to follow me around whenever I was working in her area. And she never went in anybody's room. She would follow me, stop in the hallway. I would go in someone's room, care for them. I'd come out, and she would be patiently waiting for me. And she was always winding her watch to the point that the watch was broken. And she was always asking anybody she saw, honey, what time is it? This woman in her previous life had been a banking executive, and she'd been a banking executive in the 50s and 60s at a time when women were definitely not in these positions. So she was super smart, very much a career person, and she was always worried that she was late. So she would follow you around with her watch and ask you, honey, what time is it? And I would say 9 o'clock. I'd go in somebody's room, take out their breakfast tray, put it in, and she would be waiting for me. Honey, what time is it? 9:02. And one morning, I guess I was just being in a off mood, and she was following me around, asking me repeatedly, what time is it? And I flippantly responded, 30 seconds since the last time you asked, was not the way to handle it. In my defense, I was 17 years old. Training was like 2 weeks of following some, actual orientation was 1 week of following somebody around, and then here you go. And as soon as the words came out of my mouth, the nursing supervisor just materialized out of nowhere and heard me say it. And I still have teeth marks on my left butt cheek where I got my butt chewed for that behavior. Well deserved, but I never forgot it. Yeah, I have caregivers who kind of start having a little fun with it, but really, when you respond as if it's for the first time, you're less likely to trigger defensiveness or an argument. Now, here's a little trick. Reading is an overlearned skill. So for frequent questions, you can write down the answer and put it on a piece of paper. This is great when you're driving somewhere, and the whole time you're driving, your loved one is saying, where are we going and why are we going there? And I have people who are driving and they get very distracted, and they're already nervous about driving, to the hospital in the city where there's a lot of traffic, and it's Birmingham, so every time you turn around, there's a different road closed for random reasons. And having lived in Philly, I find Birmingham like a joy to drive in because Philly is, excuse the expression, a total shit show, and it's a mess driving in there. But compared to Philly, Birmingham's like super nice. But these people get nervous, so I have told the caregivers, write down, we are going to the dentist, you're getting a checkup. And if you really want to get super detailed, you can say, we're going to the dentist, Dr. Smith, and you're getting a checkup. And just let them sit there with the notepad. And every time they ask, oh, honey, I wrote it down for you. What is it? What does it the paper say? And then they read it back. So at least, and I've had people living with dementia who will sit there and stare at the paper for the entire trip and just keep reading it over and over again. And this way, they're not asking the driver the same question. So that's a cool technique that will work, especially with frequent questions. And this is also the time that calendars, lists, and reminders are helpful at this stage. I have some people who are still able to work their smartphone and they will use the reminder feature and alarms. At some point, when that ability, or if doing that becomes a frustration and not a help, you can go old school with post-it notes, physical calendars, whiteboard on the fridge with information. But as the dementia worsens, they will stop paying attention to these lists. And now everybody's different. The majority of people will stop paying attention. And also, this is the time where the strategy of, oh, I forgot, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, works well at this stage. And here's the thing, and it is humorous, but you never know what short term memory doesn't get absorbed and what short-term memory has enough emotional voltage that it becomes a regular memory. So be prepared for the comeback. Wow, your memory's worse than mine, and just know it's coming. So one of the other questions I get in the beginning part of the journey is, do I tell my family member that they have Alzheimer's, Lewy body, whatever dementia diagnosis they have? First of all, you shouldn't be telling them anything. It should be the clinician. And I have had, it is the policy in the clinic where I work, where we disclose. And I've had family members call me up ahead of time and say, whatever you don't tell my loved one, he or she has Alzheimer's. And I'll say, okay, what do you want me to tell them? And I've had people say, oh, just say they have dementia. And I'm like, okay, why? I'm curious what the difference is. My mom, or my wife took care of her mom for X number of years, and then she took care of my mom. And she always told me, if I get Alzheimer's, shoot me. Or if I get Alzheimer's, I'll kill myself. Oh, okay. But if you say dementia, and when I told her she had dementia, she says, oh, thank goodness I don't have Alzheimer's. And I I did not respond to that out of respect to the family. But I'll be honest, I do have a problem with that because people want to know. And the earlier in the disease stage that you tell people, they have the ability to still participate in a lot of important decisions. And this is the time to find out, look, if your memory gets to a point where you can't make decisions, how do you want me to handle if you need to be on a ventilator, or if you need some type of surgery, or if this is the time to find out what their preferences are, rather than wait too late in the disease and they can't tell you. So again, have the clinician give them the news and be prepared to support them. I have had people literally breathe a sigh of relief and say, oh, thank heavens, I have an actual disease. I thought I was losing my mind. I was going crazy. But I have vascular dementia, I have Lewy body, or I have something. And really, it depends on how much insight the person has and how aware they are of what's going on. So that's just something I wanted to throw in because that has been a theme of the last couple of clinics that I've had. So the next dementia stage, and this is where people hang out the longest, is the moderate stage. This is where the person starts out oriented to person, place, and time, but they're having trouble with what we call instrumental activities of daily living, which are things like balancing the checkbook and remembering appointments and paying bills and assembling like papers for taxes. For people who work in jobs that involve a lot of brain power, they may be having more and more difficulty with executing their tasks, and they have to retire. They can't. There's no way. There's accommodations that can be made that they can still function in positions. People who have positions where it might be more physical or there's less critical thinking, these individuals may stay in their job for much longer. As people progress in the moderate stage, they start to have problems selecting clothes, dressing appropriately, and they get to the point where they may be unable at times. If you ask them what's your birthday, you might get the month and the day, but maybe not the year. And you can see the overwhelm in new environments. Strategies to support a person in the moderate stage and also to get cooperation is first to be aware that their periods of irritability and overwhelm are going to become more obvious. And I've had family caregivers say to me privately, I feel like I can't do anything. Every time I say something, I get irritability or I get a nasty response. So knowing that there's less brain juice on board, but and this is where it's difficult because on one hand, people need social activities and they need to be doing as much of their own activities as possible, but it's becoming harder to do them. So this is where you start modifying things. One approach is to schedule outings for times of the day where two conditions are met. It's best for your family member and less busy for where you're going. So this means if your routine is every Sunday you go to church services and you always went to the big busy one at 11 o'clock, there it may be time where you may want to experiment with going to maybe the 9 o'clock or the earlier one if your family member is showing distress, irritability, if they're overwhelmed by all the activity. And this is deeply personal because I have some people who are extroverts, and even as the dementia goes into severe, they always like being in the center of activity. They love it. Other people start to shrink away and they'll say things to you like, oh, I don't want to go. Like on one hand, they're bored sitting at home, but on the other hand, they're nervous because they might be seeing how as people are noticing their cognitive issues, they may be picking up on that people are treating them differently. And that's something that is really important to think about. So you really want to find that sweet spot. And also, consistent schedules are a beautiful thing. We create schedules, we use schedules with children to create memory and to create the ability for them to learn how to do things. But schedules maintain memories for us as we get older. And as I said yesterday, I love schedules because if I deviate from my schedule, that's when I start screwing up. So it's tempting to have one schedule for Monday through Friday and a different schedule for weekends, but that can create problems too, especially as people start to lose track of what day of the week it is. So you may want to have a consistent schedule and get up at the same time, even on weekends, because what happens is I have caregivers say, we have to get up early during the week. So on weekends, we sleep in. Great. But what happens is you let your person sleep in, they want to go to bed later, and after 2 days, it's hard to get them back on the Monday through Friday routine. So that's why I recommend sticking to a consistent schedule. And you want to encourage as much participation in pre dementia activities, but it's important to periodically do quality checks. For example, let's say your loved one still wants to handle the finances, and that is something they always did, and it's important to them. Maybe what you do is you put alarms or alerts in place. So if they every time they pay a bill, you get the email that says this bill was paid. So this way, if heaven forbid they're doing online banking and they start paying the same bill, 3 times, you can cancel that transaction. Or maybe you sit down next to them and say, you're really good at this online banking stuff. If you don't mind, I'm going to watch you because I always find it like I find it overwhelming, and I want to see see how you're doing. It really depends on your relationship with the person and how they would respond to you sitting there, because you don't want to act like you are shadowing them. It's not going to go. Now, there are some people living with dementia as they notice they're having problems, they will ask for backup and they will ask you to check behind them. As people start having trouble, one of the things I see a lot is sometimes people living with dementia will find certain activities really overwhelming and they give them up on their own. I hate this computer stuff. You can do it. That can happen. Where I sometimes see things going wrong is the family member sees their loved one going into the bathroom, like to take a shower, or they see them putting the clothes in the washing machine and they think all is well. But what's happening is there are problems and you may not realize they need extra support or help in an activity until like they literally break the washing machine or they put dish detergent in the dishwasher and you have bubbles all over you just have a mess in the kitchen. So I want to avoid things getting to that point. And this is also important with hygiene because oftentimes with hygiene, family members are assuming their loved one is taking a shower or taking a bath, but they'll notice that like their loved one looks rough or they're starting to detect urine or body odor. And that's when they realize their loved one's been going into the bathroom and not and walking out and saying, yes, I took a shower, but the water was never turned on. So that's why it's not a bad idea to every once in a while check the toothbrush. Is it wet? Check the shower. Did they actually go in? And not to be obvious about it, but just to head off problems before they get to a worse point. And I have more strategy after in a couple of slides. The severe stage is the person cannot live independently and they require assistance with many activities of daily living. And ironically, the more help people need with bathing, dressing, and other personal activities, oftentimes the more help they need is when they refuse the most because they don't understand why you're getting into their space. So the next couple of strategies I'm going to show you, these strategies also work for middle moderate to severe. And one of these strategies is called bridging. And that's if the person is refusing to participate in care, you can give them an object related to the care and that sometimes causes like connections in the brain so that they're like, oh, we're brushing teeth. So then they'll cooperate more. Another cool strategy is chaining. And that's where you start the activity and they finish it. And usually you can do that by holding their hand, supporting their hand, or you can also do it by having them place their hand on top of yours. There's different approaches that will work. And Another one I use a lot of is distraction. So if you're getting a lot of pushback, if you can divert them with, especially in the more severe stages, with singing, or singing works great for a lot of people. Or having them, I had a gentleman who, if I asked him about his bowling trophies, he'd start talking about bowling, and we could get so much stuff done while he talked about bowling. I actually had a woman who would only brush her teeth if I sang "I've Been Working on the Railroad." That's where I got the idea for that video. Now, another technique is hand over hand. And in this film, or in this video, the nursing assistant is having the gentleman put his hands on top of hers while she extracts his denture. And if you do need to help people with dentures, you take the bottom one out first, and then you take the top one out. So if they do bite down, you're less likely to get pinched. And the other version of that is sometimes I will put my hands over their hands and guide them. And the person who invented this technique was actually Jane Chalmers. She's a dentist, and she passed away, I want to say, about 10 years ago. Super awesome researcher. A lot of my strategies and techniques I learned from her research, and I modified them, and I built on top like strategies that I've also added my own repertoire. Now we have covered a lot of material, and you are probably thinking, how am I going to do all this? No worries, you don't need to do all of it. You don't need to know all of it. This video was about using just two specific strategies to get cooperation for one of three stages of dementia. And I'm going to put the video up so you can go back and check it out. One thing I get all of the time is that it is hard to attend even online webinars such as this because the unpredictable behavior of one's family member. I get it. That's why whenever I do something, I record everything. This way, you can watch the video when your schedule or your caregiving schedule allows it. And yes, this webinar is being offered live, and those of you watching can ask questions in real time. But for those of you who are watching the recording, I also answer my email, and you can email me at rita.jablonski@gmail, or use the contact forms or direct message me depending on what platform you are in, because I don't want anybody to feel left out. Now, the next video I'm going to do on Monday at 6 p.m. is entering their reality. And in that video, I'm going to show you how to create scripts for your unique dementia behavioral challenges so that your approach becomes even more powerful, effective, and easier. I think you're going to love this video because it's my fave, and I hope it'll be your favorite too. In the next video, I take you by the hand and walk you through the process that I call entering their reality, which is using your knowledge of your family members' pre-dementia life to create authentic scripts. And by that, I mean approaches that you have in your back pocket and you can whip out when there's an issue. And I want you to have strategies that get cooperation and result in fewer behaviors. Now, I would love to hear from you. What action are you going to take to get you started? For those of you who are listening to the recording, you can leave me comments below on the Facebook page, on the Make Dementia Your, or rather, the Make Dementia Your Bitch blog page, and or even on my YouTube site. And if you found value in this video, please share it with at least 3 people, especially those who are caring for family members living with dementia. It's easier to travel on this journey when you have other people on the path with you. So, I will see you at the next webinar and in the next video.